My name is Bob Schneider. I work with the Department of Environmental Quality in the revolving loan section, and I will be talking about Appendix C and Appendix F. Appendix C deals with asset management plans for stormwater and wastewater systems. And we've put together a definition of asset management at the bottom here, and the key words are active practice. It's the intent of the department that these asset management plans are tools that the wastewater system utility will use on a regular basis, hopefully updating them and using them to make better decisions as far as planning and upgrading and budgeting. The asset management plan for DEQ purposes will cover 5 categories or 5 components: asset inventory, level of service, criticality of assets, O&M strategies, and this might be rate methodologies or user charge systems, and capital improvement planning. In the application, an applicant can apply for funds to address all 5 of these components, or just one of these, or more than one component. Keep in mind that the finished product will have to encompass all 5 of these components for a complete and approvable asset management plan. There are a number of different asset management tools out there, and a municipality can pick and choose and combine different tools to result in the end product of an asset management plan. For example, they can use ArcGIS for asset inventory, and they can use Planet for capital improvement planning. But again, the end result is that all 5 components are addressed. Who is eligible? A municipality is eligible that has jurisdiction over construction and operation of the system. We have two examples here. The first example is the Lansing, Delta Township, and Capital City Airport. Lansing is a service provider to a number of municipalities in the area. Lansing has a wastewater treatment plant and then bills outlying townships as wholesale customers. Delta Township, as a wholesale customer, has a collection system that they take the treatment costs from the city of Lansing and add to that their own local operation of the collection system costs and their administration costs. Capital City Airport has a stormwater system, and so they can come into our program for a SAW stormwater asset management plan. Delta Township, because they've got a collection system, they can come in for a asset management plan for their collection system. And Lansing, because they've got a collection system and they've got a wastewater treatment system, can come in for a SAW asset management plan for those components. Grand Ledge is a second example. Grand Ledge, again, is a service provider like the city of Lansing. They have a treatment facility and they service Oneida Township. Unlike the previous arrangement, Grand Ledge is responsible for all of Oneida Township's collection system costs and billing their customers. So Grand Ledge is responsible for the operation and construction of the system for Grand Ledge and for the operation of Oneida Township. Sometimes these jurisdictional arrangements, these intermunicipal service agreements, can be confusing. It was originally contemplated that our office would look at these legal documents and render a decision as to whether the municipality or applicant did have the jurisdiction over construction and operation. We have since talked to the Attorney General, and we are leaving that decision as far as jurisdiction goes to the applicant. What is eligible? There are a number of grant eligibility items for asset management planning, and I'll address a couple of the more important ones, or the ones we've had most discussion on. The SAW asset management plan will cover costs for the asset management plan software, hardware, and training, and GIS hardware, software, and training. However, the work group decided that we wanted to put a limit on how much money a particular applicant could draw for those different categories. And we have set up limits based upon population size. These limits, however, can be exceeded if a justification is made by the applicant. Other eligible items are asset condition assessment. Work must be done based upon certain requirements and certified personnel, and the cost would have to be based on a per-foot basis. Also, any sewers that are evaluated must be at least 20 years old. And again, if an applicant chooses to exceed that 20-year or deviate from that 20-year old requirement, they need to submit justification in their application. Also, any specific tasks associated with an NPDES permit that might not be addressed in our guidance are allowable under our program. Stormwater utility development costs are also allowed. We will pay for development of user charge systems, service agreements, ordinances. We will pay for those development costs, but we will not pay for the defense of those legal documents. Cross-sectoring. Cross-sectoring is an important aspect of asset management planning, and we encourage all municipalities to cross-sector not only with outside municipalities in sharing certain types of components, certain types of software, those kind of things, but we also encourage within the municipalities cross-sectoring. For example, if the applicant wants to use SAW asset management plan money to do a asset inventory using GIS equipment, they're going to be walking down a street and they'll be picking up the manholes and catch basins for that inventory. But as they're doing that, there'll also be things like house leads for the water system, there'll be fire hydrants, and they're certainly encouraged to pick those up with the GIS equipment. The equipment's there, the personnel's there. It's convenient to identify those assets as they go along. However, the program is not intended to pay for those items. We will pay for the wastewater asset inventory, but we don't want to be paying for the water asset inventory. So there will have to be a differentiation between those costs when submitting invoices. Expectations. There are several expectations of the applicant. The first is that after a 3-year grant period, there is a complete and approvable asset management plan that covers all 5 of those components we talked about earlier. The second is that the applicant will need to certify that they have completed all those grant activities at the end of the 3-year period. The applicant must demonstrate that they've got significant progress towards funding the asset management plan. Now that will entail a review of the rate methodology. With the stormwater system, there will be no rate methodology, so it's going to be important for the applicant to analyze the costs to maintain the system and support the asset management plan required. To determine significant progress, an applicant will, in the first 2.5 years of the grant period, submit their rate methodology to the revolving loan section's office. Our office will review that rate methodology to determine that there are sufficient revenues being generated that will take care of the asset management plan implementation. If that demonstration does show that there are sufficient revenues, then the applicant is finished. The demonstration has been provided, and they've got a complete and approvable asset management plan at that point. To determine significant progress, an applicant will submit to the revolving loan section their rate methodology within the first 2.5 years of the grant period. Our office will review that rate methodology to determine that there are sufficient revenues to cover expenses and to implement the asset management plan. If, however, it is determined that there are not sufficient revenues being generated, then the applicant will have to eliminate that gap. There will be a 5-year plan that the applicant will put together, and there will also be a minimum rate increase during the life of the grant. For example, if a municipality has right now a rate of $2 per 1,000 gallons, and their rate methodology shows that they in fact should be charging $3 per 1,000 gallons, they have a funding gap. So the municipality or applicant will then put together a 5-year plan on how to raise rates in that 5-year period to cover that gap. There is a dollar gap that they've got to cover, so a minimum 10% will have to be initiated in that first 3 years of the grant period. So during that grant period, the applicant will pass a rate resolution for 10 cents, which would be 10% of that dollar shortfall. Then after the grant period is completed, they will have another 5 years to eliminate that gap. Cherie Meyer covered the SAW NPDS interface, and so I will defer to her for those comments and pass this slide over. There are two asset management plans that communities can use that satisfy the SAW requirements. The first is the CUPS asset management plan, which is developed by EPA. CUPS stands for Checkup Program for Small Systems. This software is free. It's available through EPA, downloaded from their site. It's for water and wastewater systems. The asset management plan software is supported by EPA. There's a number of different tutorials they have on site and that are included with the software itself. And they've also got a number of work groups and work sessions that will answer questions that somebody might have on the software. There have been a number of pilot programs done in the state of Michigan and a number of communities around the country that are using CUPS. And through experience, it has been demonstrated that the CUPS software is primarily or most beneficial for those communities of populations of less than 5,000. It's not a very sophisticated software program, so it's felt that any municipalities over that might choose to have a more sophisticated software package to use when doing asset management planning. If a community does choose to use CUPS, keep in mind that one of the components, the rate methodology component, is lacking in the CUPS software. So a community or municipality or applicant would have to implement their own or develop their own or pull from another tool that asset management plan component of the rate methodology. Our office has worked together with the Water Resources Division to come up with a simplified asset management plan. This is an Excel-based spreadsheet with a number of workbooks attached to the spreadsheet. And we address the 5 components. However, we have combined the asset inventory component with the criticality component in the asset inventory spreadsheet. Here is a copy of that spreadsheet, asset inventory and criticality. Along the top, you can see a number of different headings. These are identifiers that have been identified by the NPDS permit, and so we've included them in our asset inventory. At the end, the last 3 columns address criticality. Keep in mind that these asset inventory worksheets can be expanded because they are an Excel-based format. The yellow indicates those cells that require input by the applicant. Here is a close-up of the criticality component. The last 3 columns deal with criticality. These 3 columns have been changed to more accurately reflect what's in the NPDS permit. So column O, probability of failure, will remain the same. Column P, consequence of failure, will be criticality of failure. And column Q, which is criticality factor, will be relabeled business factor. In column O and column P, an applicant will rate the asset based upon its probability and consequence of failure in a number system 1 through 5, with 5 being the greatest probability of failure or consequence of failure. Those cells are multiplied to come up with a criticality factor of 25. Anytime a criticality factor is over 16, that cell turns red, and that indicates that this asset is of significant importance. And again, keep in mind that these titles will change with the updated workbook that's now available on our website. The next table here, table 4, is for level of service. Of all the components, the level of service component is the most subjective, and it's going to require a discussion with stakeholders over a number of different topics. We've listed some of those topics here for discussion purposes. What the applicant will do is develop a level of service statement, and then we'll discuss these level of service determinants to come up with a level of service plan. Table 5 is the rate methodology. Table 5 is a table that we have used for a number of years in our office to help municipalities develop their rate structures. Again, the yellow indicates where a number is to be inputted. There's a number of different columns across the top. The first column is for budget numbers, and the next 5 columns are for various options that a municipality can view when it comes to rates. Option 1 is a rate methodology based strictly on billable flow. Option number 2 is a rate methodology based strictly on fixed costs. And option 3, 4, and 5 are a combination fixed variable cost components. Or table 6, replacement expenses, is a component of the rate methodology. In this table, we identify those assets that are operational, pieces of equipment, pumps, motors, generators, vehicles, things like that, and that are going to last less than 20 years. What the applicant does is they identify those replacement items, and in the top line it's a pump number 1. It's identified that that pump will last 3 more years and it'll cost $15,000 to replace. Therefore, the applicant will want to be setting aside $5,000 a year on an annual basis so that after 3 years they will have the necessary funds to go in and replace pump number 1. The purpose of the replacement table is to set aside money for those pieces of equipment that you know are going to fail, so that when the failure time does arrive, that you don't go back into your budget and have to disrupt your budget. Keep in mind that all of these replacement items, they will tally up to a total replacement reserve required on an annual basis, and that number is then put into the budget. At the end of the year, you want to make sure that those dollar amounts for replacement expenses are put into a dedicated replacement fund so that when the time comes, those funds are available. You don't want those funds to be designated surplus funds and then go into retained earnings or cash and cash equivalents. Table 7 is the Capital Improvement Project Plan worksheet. This follows the same kind of thought process as the replacement table did. You identify a project, you identify a time frame, and you start setting aside money for that project so that when that time frame arrives, you got the necessary funds to take that project and implement that project. Keep in mind that there will be 2 projects that a applicant will be dealing with as far as capital improvement planning. The first type of project are smaller dollar amount projects which the applicant will be using internal funds to finance. Those might be re-roofing of the pump house for $15,000, or in this particular situation, rebuilding a clarifier for $15,000. There will be other capital improvement project plans that will be much larger in scope, much more dollar intensive, and these will most likely be funded through external means, going out to the market and receive bonds and pay for the project with bond money. Those projects you can also identify in the project plan, but those projects will probably result in undertaking some sort of financial advisor to help track when the best time to implement those projects might be. When we are looking at the asset management plan, we are not going to be looking at those large-scale projects that are going to be requiring outside financing. The projects that we will want to see addressed in the asset management plan are those smaller kinds of projects that the municipality or applicant will address internally. The projects that you identify in the project plan, again, like the replacement table, you will add up those, and at the bottom you will have a total capital improvement reserve that you will set aside on an annual basis. And again, similar to the replacement account, you will develop a capital improvement account or capital improvement fund where those dollars will go at the end of the year to fund those projects when they come due. Table 8. Table 8 is a 10-year budget, and this just gives a municipality an opportunity to take a look at what's going to happen down the road. They can manipulate the inflation factor, and they input their budget dollar amounts, and then they can track what their revenues are going to be and expenses over the course of a 10-year time frame. This is probably a place where you would start putting in those large-scale projects and get with a financial advisor to see which year down the road might be most advantageous to start thinking about going out to the market and bonding for a large-scale project. Appendix F deals with disadvantage determinations. There are 4 criteria used to determine disadvantaged status. The first criteria is that more than 50% of the area served by the project is designated or identified as a poverty area by the Census Bureau. We have worked with the state demographer and determined that this means that at least 20% of the families whose income at the past 12 months is below the poverty level. These numbers are detailed in the Census Fact Finder online. In this first example, the first community has a percentage of 17.9, and clearly this is not greater than 20% or greater, so they do not satisfy criteria A for disadvantage determination. The second municipality has a 28% of its population below poverty level, so on the surface it would appear that this municipality is disadvantaged. However, what happens often with smaller municipalities, and this is a smaller municipality in this example, that when they're doing the census, the accuracy is decreased by the smaller number of census applicants. And so in this particular situation, we look to the margin of error, and in this situation, the margin of error is 15.7, which when plus or minus when computed against the 28% renders that 28% an unreliable number. So both of these communities under criteria A are not disadvantaged. So if they don't satisfy under criteria A, we go to criteria B. Criteria B is a little simpler criteria in that the median annual household income of the municipality must be below the poverty level, the federal poverty guidelines for a family of 4, which currently is $23,350. In this example, the median annual household income of this community is $28,173. Clearly, that is above the threshold, so using criteria B, this municipality is not disadvantaged either. So if criteria A does not work and criteria B does not work, then we go to criteria C and D. We have combined criteria C and D into a number of calculations, and in order to do those calculations, we need Appendix F filled out. There will be 4 questions that are asked of the applicant. What is the estimated cost of construction? What is the current existing debt on their annual debt payments on the wastewater or storm system? What is the current operation and maintenance replacement expenses? And what is the total number of REUs, residential equivalent units, in the system? Depending on which program the applicant is applying for within the SAW program, they will answer one or all of these questions. For example, if the applicant is coming in for a planning grant, then they will have an estimated construction cost, and they will be able to answer question 1, question 2, question 3, and question 4. If an applicant is coming in for an asset management plan, there is no estimated construction cost, so the applicant will only be able to answer question 2, 3, and 4. If an applicant is coming in for a stormwater asset management plan, unfortunately, they will not be able to answer any of these 4 questions, and so we will rely entirely on criteria A and criteria B to determine disadvantage status for stormwater projects. This is an example of the calculations that our office has put together. There are 2 sets of calculations. The first set of calculations deals with the median annual household income, and this is the set of calculations that appear towards the bottom of the page. We take the census number of $28,178, and this is the 2010 census number for Bessemer, the city of Bessemer in the Upper Peninsula. We apply to that a ratio that deals with the Detroit Consumers Price Index so that we can take the 2010 census number and bring it up to 2013 census levels. Then we come up with a MAHI threshold, a medium household income threshold, and in this case it's $299. That's the threshold that the applicant or municipality must exceed to be determined disadvantaged. Then we take the actual operational costs and debt costs that a family or a household is incurring in Bessemer, the city of Bessemer. We've got operation, maintenance, replacement of $221,956. And we've got existing debt of $141,696 for a total annual cost for the wastewater system of $363,652. We divide that number, that total annual cost, by the total number of residential equivalent units in the system, which is 1,132, and we come up with an annual user cost for a residential customer of $321. This $321 does exceed the $299, so they are determined to be disadvantaged. So again, when a community comes into our program and wishes to be determined disadvantaged, we will go to criteria A. If that does not give us an answer, we go to criteria B. If that doesn't give us an answer, then we go to criteria C and D. But in order to do criteria C and D, we need to have the Appendix F filled out as much as possible. That includes the presentation for Appendix C and Appendix F. Again, my name is Bob Schneider. This is my contact information, and this is my email address. If you've got any questions concerning asset management or with disadvantage determinations, please feel free to give me a call or email me. Thank you.